Welcome back once again to A Spiritual Joint, where we talk about all things spiritual. Everything is spiritual, so we talk about everything. So just wanted to take a moment today to talk about something that we may not always talk about, or we may not even realize. I'm talking about grief, and not the grief we usually think of, because sometimes we don't even recognize what the issue is that's going on. Because oftentimes when we think about grief, we usually think about, losing a loved one, losing a friend, losing a fur baby, bird baby, scale baby, something sentient outside of ourselves. But what we oftentimes don't realize is that we can and do often lose parts of ourselves in various ways. Just did a reading, if you want to check it out, I did an inner child reading, where inner child had a message for you that will be in the playlist if you are so inclined. But, again, we think about the external loss, those of people, things outside of ourselves, even places. But, sometimes we don't recognize, we don't realize, we don't understand that when we lose parts of ourselves, and that can be for many reasons, Sometimes we have parts of ourselves fractured by other people, fractured by, trigger, people being mean to us, people being disrespectful to us, people being mean to us. That can cause us to fracture into different parts, wherein we take the strongest parts of ourselves and we hide the smaller parts of ourselves. And that, that's true and valid. Sometimes we have to do that, for our own safety, from our own well-being. But there also comes time when you grow, when you expand, when you learn something new, that you actually lose a part of yourself, in a manner of speaking. And it's because of the growth, because we have gone on to another level, gone on to another place, another space, another time. And who we were before we experienced that growth, who we were before we made those changes, before we climbed up the ladder, before we walked through that new door, that person behind us, that person underneath us, that person next to us, or who was next to us, is no longer right there. They're beneath us, or they are behind us, or slightly to the side of us. And because up until that moment in time where you make that change, where you grow into this new you, you're with the other you for a long period of time, and you were used to that you. That's sometimes why we don't make the change, why we don't move forward, why we don't take those steps, why we don't take the risk, why we don't accept that opportunity. Because we realize, maybe not always on a conscious level, But we realize that this is going to change our life. This is going to rewrite the dynamic. And many times we are not ready to make this change. Sometimes we're not willing to make the change, which is why sometimes we don't take those steps to walk through that door, to grab that handle, turn the handle, and, step into the new you. But as we are brave enough to accept that, we are going to take up the challenge, going to mark this new territory, we have to let go of what we were, what was, in order for us to be the new, to be beyond what we were. And sometimes we are actually grieving when we are no longer who we used to be. Many times we've been that me, been that you for such a long period of time. You get comfortable. That's why, it's said that you have to get out of your comfort zone. You've been comfortable being how you were. You've been comfortable doing how you were. You've been comfortable in that space of you at that time. And when we make those steps, we move to that new location. We move to that new situation. We have moved with motivation. Then, sometimes we feel like we are abandoning ourselves, that we are losing ourselves, that we are leaving ourselves, when sometimes what we could do to help facilitate this growth and development is to not necessarily lose it, not necessarily forget it, not leave it behind, but just keep it in a happy space in our memories so we don't have to mourn. Even if it was a part of you that, you may not feel the best about, you may not feel proud about, maybe. But it's okay, because we are learning to be human, learning to be human. And in that learning, sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes things happen that perhaps we could control. Many times we could not control. So just holding that part of you with a little bit of care, a little bit of compassion, a little bit of love for who we were, for allowing who we were to get us to where we are now, to have made the change, to have taken those steps, to have moved to this new place, to have journeyed, to have been brave enough, courageous enough, strong enough to walk through that door, climb that ladder, change the paradigm. So, looking at it in a different light, to not mourn who we were, what we were, but to thank who we were and what we were for getting us to this next phase in our life, for moving us to this next part of our life, for allowing us to have given us the opportunity to become a new you, a new me. So just And sometimes that's why we sometimes feel sad when, you get that promotion and, it's what you wanted, what you said you wanted, what you've been working for. And it's like, the moment comes and you feel, yeah, yay. But then sometimes on the inside, you're like, no, it's not yay. Because we have not learned to love who we were, to love what we were, where we were, how we were, why we were, when we were. It's a little interesting. It's part of this is part of what happened in the reading, the inner child reading, collecting those spaces of us and bringing them back as whole, because then we wouldn't grieve, then we wouldn't feel sad or remorse, reminisce again. So just be thankful you made it. Be grateful. Say thank you to the you that brought you to this new space. Enjoy the changes so you don't have to feel sad. Embrace the change. Be excited for the change. And that could possibly change your perspective on that melancholy that you may feel when you make these new moves. Because remember, you're not given anything you can't manage. So it's time to take those next steps and think of it like the you from before your change is holding you up so that you can go to the next phase. So allow you to hold you up, allow you to push you up, allow you to help you go on to be the best you for this time in your life, because this is a journey without end. So allow that you to be your support, to be your foundation, to be your stepping stone, a supportive stepping stone, not that you're stepping on to, kick them in the face or grind them or whatever, but the one who enlaces their fingers of their hands and reaches out for you to step up, who pushes you up, who lifts you up, who helps you rise. So remember who you were, with love and gratitude, so that when you move through the door, you climb up that ladder or shift into the new paradigm, that you can do so with peace, you can do so with joy, you can do so with love. Peace.